So imagine, you have your virtual machine, you have provisioned your virtual machine, and but you don't want to assign a public IP address to the virtual machine, or you don't want a VPN connection just to access the virtual machine. So, instead of assigning a public IP address to, download the RDP file and then connecting to the virtual machine, or, having a point to point, VPN or point to site VPN just to connect to the virtual machine. What is the alternate way, you can connect to your virtual machine even without downloading any, RDP file or, and straight out of the browser. So in this video, what we'll do is basically we'll explore how you can set that up and how you can access directly the VM from the browser. So let's get started with that. So what you can do is basically, when you navigate to your portal.azure.com, you can see, I don't have any resources here. So let's go to all resources, and you can see I don't have anything listed down here. So what we are going to do is basically create a new VM. Right? So I don't have any resource group. So what the next thing that I'm going to do is basically create a resource group. Let's create a new one. Let's make it test G. Then let's name the virtual machine. Okay. I'll make this as East US. I don't want any redundancy plan here. Okay, and I'll choose the image as Windows 2019. Okay, I'll choose the lowest one here because we are just testing it. Okay, let's go to next to disk. Let's go to networking after this. And here, what I'm going to do is basically, you can see this is the public IP address that will be created, when this VM is going to be provisioned. So what I'm going to do is basically mention that, I don't want this public IP address. So that means that, I won't be able to connect to this VM directly through an RDP connection, right? So let's go to next for management. Let everything be, as, the default uh, here. And let's move on to monitoring. Let's leave this everything as default. Let's go to next, advanced, go to tags, review and create. Once this validation is passed, I'll hit create, and I'll wait for, the VM to be provisioned. And then I'll show you a way how you can connect to this VM without, the public IP address or without your VPN, and how easy it is. Okay, so since our resource have been provisioned, the VM has been provisioned. So what we'll do next is we'll go to the, the resource. That is the VM, the virtual machine. You can see I don't have any public IP address here, and I won't be able to connect to this VM directly. And so the next way, what you can do is basically to connect to this VM is using the Azure Bastion service. So if you scroll down under the connect, you can see there is a connect option here, which uses the RDP option to connect to your, VM. You have another option here which says Bastion, and you can click on that. And this basically lets you connect to your VM directly without a public IP address, without your VPN connection, and from your browser. So what we are going to do is basically see how we can configure this and connect to our VM. But remember this, when you provision your Bastion, it means that it is in the backend. It's going to provision, its own resources, a virtual machine, and it's going to assign its own IP address, and that's going to incur charges. So if you want to learn more about the pricing, you can click here, which says Bastion pricing starts with an hourly base rate. So you can click on this, and this will list down all the pricing details for you based on the region, the currency, and you can see you have the basic, the standard, and even the outbound data transfer is going to cost you. For the first 5 GB, it's going to be free, but after that, it's going to be 0.087 per GB. So that's about the pricing here. So now let's see how we can configure this. So there are two ways, how you can configure this. You can either, click on this deploy Bastion. So this will auto configure everything at the backend, or you can configure this manually. So in order to configure it manually, what you need is basically, within the virtual network itself, you need to create a subnet, and that should be the Azure Bastion subnet, which will host the Bastion's, server for you to connect to this VM. So let's see how we can create that subnet first. So let's go to the virtual machine, overview. If you look at the virtual network, and the subnet, let's go to the virtual network, and under the subnets, you can see I have only the default one. So I have to create another subnet, which is going to basically host our Azure Bastion service. So let's create that subnet here, and let's name this as Azure Bastion subnet. And this has to be, exactly this name. You cannot change this, and there should be no VMs which should be provisioned under this subnet. So you can see this is the IP address that we are getting, or the subnet address range that we are getting, and we can leave everything else as the default. And let's save this. Okay, so once this is done, what we can do is basically we can go back to the, either you can go back to the virtual machine and provision the Bastion service from there, or you can provision it on the virtual network itself. So let's go back to the virtual machine. Let's go to the Bastion service, and instead of deploying it manually, I want to show you how you can configure this, or sorry, to deploy it automatically. I'll show you how you can configure this manually. So let's hit configure manually. So you can see it has taken my subscription. The resource group is the same which we created, which is the test RG. You can name the instance or the Azure Bastion service as could be anything. So let's say testing Bastion service. Okay, and you can choose the region where it should be. The tier, don't choose as standard because we are just testing it. You can either choose the developer or the basic, to so that you will have minimum charges. And let's, and the developer option is not available in all the regions, so probably it's not available in the East US region for now. So what we'll do is basically we'll go with the basic for now. So the only difference between the tier is basically once you have a standard tier, this would allow you to auto scale your Bastion services, and that's the reason you have created your subnets, because in the backend it will be hosted on those subnets. So when you create that, so let's say there are a lot of people who are trying to connect, so that's the reason there is an auto scaling which is provided here. And when you click on standard, you have the instance count as how many instances would you like this to be deployed. So you can see it is 2, but we don't want to use that because we are just uh, This session is only for a demo session, so let's use the basic one. And sometimes I've seen, the resources that we provisioned are not, quickly updated in the Azure portal. And that's the reason, we are not able to see the virtual network, which is part of this East US region. Because if you go back, let's see, let's go to our resource group, and you can see all the resources are basically provisioned in the same location, which is the East US region. And our virtual network is also, part of that region. But sometimes it takes time when you probably basically use your the portal to deploy the resources. It takes some time, so we'll wait for some time and we'll come back again to test it, whether we are able to see this virtual network in this drop down list or not. So I had paused the video for some time, and once the resources are not now getting reflected. So let's take an example again. Let's give the instance name as testing. Let's change. So this is going to be in the East US region. The tier is going to be our basic. And now if you scroll down and look at the virtual network, since we are in the East US region and all our resources have been provisioned in the East US region. So now if you hit the drop down, you would be able to see your virtual network. And there you go. So this is what the subnet, is what we created a moment ago. That is the Azure Bastion subnet. And so that's the reason it is, showing, that one. You can see the default one is all, grayed out. You cannot use that. So you have to use this one. Or if it wasn't, if you did not create it before, you can actually click on manage subnet configuration and you would be able to create it from. So now it will take you back to the, virtual network. You can see, and you would be able to add your subnet details here. So since we have already created it manually, we don't have to do it now. Let's go back. Now let's go to the next for tags. And there is one more thing which I want to show you, this previous one. And along with this, it will also create your public IP address. So this is how you would be able to connect to your VMs. So let's go to next, advanced, create, and create. So this deployment is going to take some time, probably around, could be around 5 to 10 minutes. So we'll, wait till then for this deployment to be complete. And then I'll show you how you can connect to your VM from the browser directly. Okay, so it took almost 80 minutes for this to be deployed. So now once it is deployed, what we'll do is basically go to the resource. So what we'll do is basically go to the VM. Oops. So now you can see, you have the connectivity details here. So let's utilize that. So whatever, the username and the password that you had set during the initial deployment of the virtual machine, you have to use that to connect to this, VM using your browser. So I'm just providing my credentials. Once I hit connect, okay, my pop-up is blocked. So what I'll do is I'll click on the pop-up icon here and click on always allow pop-ups and redirects from the portal.azure.com. Done. And then click on connect again. So you can see, I am basically not, downloading anything on my local machine, and everything is basically getting connected through my browser directly. So that's how basically, your Azure Bastion services helps you. So one, you have your enhanced security. So that means that, you don't have to assign public IP addresses to your individual VMs. So that means, it saves you. It basically, saves you from your, exposing your VMs to the public, right, internet. So that is the enhanced security. The other one is basically the simplified connectivity. So that means that I don't have to download anything on my local machine. I can simply, log on to the portal.azure.com, and from the browser itself, I can connect to the VM. So that's how, the Bastion services will help you. And since we have, you can see I am connected now, and it's working exactly as it should. So right now, let me just close this, head back to my portal.azure.com. And since we were able to test everything, again, the best practice is to always go ahead and delete all the resources that you have provisioned. And the best way to do is basically, whichever resource group you have used to deploy your resources, just simply, go ahead and delete that resource group. Because you can delete individual, resources as well, but it's best to delete them all at once. Just, select the resource group name, so you can directly copy it from here, paste it here, and then just hit delete. I hope this session was helpful. Thank you.